Welcome back, students. So today we will be discussing about the classification of cost based on behavior. How do we identify the behavior of cost? Based on the volatility of the cost, its instability or unpredictability of cost is classified based on behavior. We have three classifications of cost based on behavior. One is fixed cost, variable cost, and semi-variable cost. Now, what is variable cost? So variable cost is now let's see what is fixed cost. So the cost which is not affected, you cannot see any change in the cost due to the changes in the activities of the business is called as fixed cost. When cost doesn't change, when cost is constant, irrespective of the change in the activities of the business, we term it as fixed cost. Examples of fixed cost are the rent, depreciation, lease, salaries, etc. are called as fixed cost. Example, rent. Irrespective of the number of items stored in the storehouse, you are going to pay the rent. So it is fixed. Irrespective of whether you're using the go down or not, you have to pay the rent. You are storing 1 unit, or you are storing 100 units, or you are storing above the capacity, you are going to pay the same rent. That is why it is called as fixed cost. I repeat again, what is fixed cost? Fixed cost remains constant irrespective of the level of activity. Such cost, we identify it as fixed cost. The second type of cost based on behavior is variable cost. So this cost varies in proportionate to the changes in the level of activity, is called as variable cost. So examples of variable cost are raw materials cost, packaging cost, sales commission, wages are all variable. An additional unit of production would lead to an addition cost. Say for example, if one unit of manufacturing costs you 10 rupees, if you're manufacturing 5 units, it's going to be 50 rupees. If you're increasing the number of units, another 50 units, then it will be another 5 units, it would be another 50 rupees. So it's going to be changing depending upon the level of activity. It's like unitary method. So you are going to, the cost, the total cost changes irrespective of the level, in proportionate to the level of activity, is called as variable cost. I repeat again, variable cost refers to that cost or the cost which proportionately changes to the level of activity. Example, raw materials, packaging, sales commission, wages, etc. Now, the total cost changes, but the per unit remains the same. Keep in mind, in variable cost, the per unit remains the same, but the total cost is going to vary depending upon the level of activity. You should remember that. Next comes to your semi-variable cost. The semi-variable cost is up to a certain level of activity, the cost remains fixed, and after a certain level, after that level of activity, the cost is going to increase. Example, your power consumption. The power consumption rates or your telephone bills, up to a certain units consumed, you have a fixed rate. Once the power consumption increases or above this level, the price is going to vary for every number of units added. So that is what we call it as semi. So up to a certain level, it is not influenced, but after a certain level of activity, it keeps changing. So best example is your power consumption, the maintenance cost, it could be management cost, it could be, or the supervision cost would be varying. At to certain level, it is fixed, and after, as it increases, the cost also increases. This is about your cost. Now, example of variable cost. A company spends rupees 250 material cost for every unit of a product. If the company produces 1,000 units, it spends 2,500. That is 1,000 into 2.5. So it will be spending 2,500 units. It will be spending rupees 2,500 per 1,000. So the cost of one unit is 2.5. material costs. For 1000 units, it's going to be 1000 into 2.5, 2500. So if it produces 2000, it will increase in proportion to that. So it will be 2000 into 2.5. So it becomes 5000. That means the per unit is going to be the same, but the total cost is going to vary. This is called as variable cost. So what do you understand? The cost per unit does not change, but the total cost varies directly with the level of activity. So that how many number of units are increasing, so that many units it is going to increase. Okay, so per unit remains the same, and the total variable cost is variable cost per unit into number of units of activity. So it means that the total variable cost increases, but the cost per unit will not change. Okay, so the total cost changes, but cost per unit doesn't change. How do you calculate your total variable cost? Variable cost per unit into number of units of activity. Some more examples of variable cost is direct material, direct labor, supplies, fuel and power, spoilage cost, receiving cost, royalties, overtime premiums, sales commission, and delivery expenses are considered as variable cost. So they can ask you for 2 marks. What is variable cost? Gives few examples. Then you are going to answer this. Later, don't tell this was not told in the class. For 2 marks, you can expect this. Now coming to fixed cost. Look here. ABC company pays monthly rent of rupees 30,000 for a factory building. Regardless of how many units are produced, the company pays the same amount. If we are to compute the fixed cost per unit, if the company is producing 1000 units, it would be 30 rupees, meaning to say 30,000 divided by 1000 units, you get 30 rupees. If the company produces 1500 units, then fixed cost per unit would be rupees 20. How? 30,000 divided by the existing number of units you are going to get it. So meaning to say that as the level of activity increases, the fixed cost per unit decreases. The total fixed cost remains constant. This is the feature of fixed cost. Okay, what is the feature of fixed cost? At the level of activity, as the level of activity increases, look here, as the activity increases from 1000 to 1500, the per unit is decreased from 30 rupees to 20 rupees. But the total fixed cost remains constant irrespective of the level of activity. Have I made it clear? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Some examples are fixed cost including rent, depreciation, patent amortization, property insurance, property taxes, fixed salaries of production executives and indirect labor can be taken under cost. So what are the features of cost? The total fixed cost remains constant. Regardless of the level of activity, the business pays the same amount. However, the fixed cost per unit changes as the level of activity changes. What is the order of change? As the level of activity increases, the fixed cost per unit decreases. Keep that in mind. As more units are produced, the fixed cost per unit decreases. So these are the 4 important features of fixed cost. So again, they can ask you for 2 marks. What is the features of fixed cost? This is the features of fixed cost. Next, mixed cost, or we call it as semi-variable cost. So mixed cost contains both fixed and variable element. It's a combination. That's why we call it a semi-variable. It is neither fixed nor it is said to be variable. So the company pays a constant fixed cost and a variable amount on top of it. So example of mixed cost includes your utilities, repairs and maintenance, inspection, fringe benefits it could be, employers' payrolls it could be, and salaries that contain a fixed amount plus commission. So the total cost is equal to fixed cost plus variable cost. So the total cost is equal to fixed cost plus variable cost can be rewritten as variable cost per unit into number of units. So to determine the fixed cost, we consider all these 3 costs. We have fixed, variable, and semi-variable. So the total cost of determining a particular product would be fixed cost plus variable cost. So your fixed cost would be directly given, but your variable cost, if you have to calculate, it is variable cost per unit into number of units. So as a whole, we can say that the total variable cost increases as the number of units increases. Variable cost per unit is constant. So total fixed, when we talk about total fixed cost, the fixed cost is going to decrease as the number of units increases, and it remains constant. The total fixed cost remains constant irrespective of the level of activity. And what is mixed cost? Mixed cost is a combination of both fixed and variable cost. So we are going to segregate it, a part of it as variable and a part of it as mixed cost. For easy understanding or for easy management only, we are doing this. So this is about behavior of or cost behavior or classification of cost based on behavior. So with this, we come to the end of the behavior or classification of cost